everyone. Welcome back to the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. I'm GoLocal News editor Kate Nagel. Just chatted with Jennifer Lawless down at American University about what's taking place down inside the Beltway. We're going to get much more local here right now. I'd like to welcome author Ed Iannuccilli around the corner, the former chair of Rhode Island Hospital, a Renaissance man, if you will.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming into the studio
Nice
today.
To be here. Thank you very much.
Because you have just published and released the third book in your series.
Yeah.
We have Growing Up Italian, Whatever Happened to Sunday Dinner, and then finally My Story Continues from Neighborhood to Junior High School, growing up in Mount Pleasant. You've had a very storied career in medicine. And we talked a little bit before you came on the show. When did you say to yourself, I'm going to sit down and write these books about what it was like to grow up Italian here in Rhode Island?
It was a few years ago, at one of the Christmas Eve dinners, I was talking about what the dinner meant and the symbolism of it, and I was also talking about how fortunate we were to be at this dinner. Fortunate because we had grandparents as immigrants who came here and gave us the opportunity in this country to succeed. And I spoke a little bit about how difficult their travel was. One of my sons said to me, I didn't know that. And I said, well, you need to know that. So I went home and I wrote a story about how my grandfather used to bury his fig tree every year and submitted it to Bob Whitcomb at the Journal, and he published it. And that incented me to write a little bit more, and that became the first book, Growing Up Italian, Grandfather's Fig Tree, and Other Stories.
How long did it take you to sort of, the process of editing is the process of editing, but to put the kind of words on the paper and get that first, how long did it take?
That takes a long time, and sometimes you think you're never done when you've written a story, so that's why it takes so long, and you keep going back to it. I can't give you a time length, but at least 2 full days to write one story of about 1,200 words.
Okay.
Or so.
So what was the reaction to the first book? Because, we were talking, you had book 2, and now the third one out. If you've read these, you've been around, you've been to book signings. What do you hear from folks in Rhode Island when they've read that book? Did they say, oh my gosh, I can relate?
It doesn't matter what ethnic background they came from, Irish, Italian, Polish, they all said to me the same thing, you wrote my story. Because it's the story of growing up with family in a neighborhood in the 40s, the late 40s, and the 50s. And the similar experiences in those neighborhoods and with family people relate to all those experiences.
And speaking of relating, let's go look at the second book here, Sunday Dinner. Again, just that commonality about being with family. Talk with us a little bit about book number 2.
Well, it was a series, it was a continuation of the stories that I started in book number 1 in Growing Up Italian. And one of the stories that came forward most frequently, especially when I was speaking and talking to people, is about Sunday dinner. Do you remember Sunday dinner? And Sunday dinner in our house, we lived in a 3-tenement house, and the middle tenement was my grandparents, and we lived on the 3rd floor, and my aunt and her family on the 1st floor. So we had a compound, and every Sunday, without invitation, we were expected to go to my grandmother's for the abbondanza, for the Sunday dinner, and it was something that really stuck because that's when family talked to each other. There was very little television. There was certainly no media. And that's what I tried to relate, what happened on those Sunday dinners.
And you got to talk food, and you got to talk family. So you got to tell us a little bit, what were your favorites from Sunday dinner growing up?
Yeah, well, it was always pasta was the favorite. In fact, I just wrote a story about Thanksgiving dinner when I was a kid. And the Thanksgiving dinner was the same as every Sunday dinner, except there was turkey instead of chicken, and there was cranberry sauce. But
there was still pasta.
We always started with lasagna or some kind of pasta or dumpling soup, some soup, and then the main courses came from that point.
And that was Sunday dinner. And now this third book, which just came out 2 weeks ago, that we're here to talk about today.
Right. Thank you.
The story continuing from neighborhood to junior high school. So look at young Ed here, getting ready to go to school. So what, talk with us about life and the school experience growing up. What's your kind of take on it now as you look back?
Well, the schools that I went to, of course, I walked to, and in some cases came home for lunch. But junior high school was a major a level, a big leap where you went to school for the whole day. and you had lunch at the school, and it was a bit anxious. I was a bit anxious when I first went there. But that's where I learned that I was moving now out of the neighborhood and meeting kids from other neighborhoods. Kids who were bused into the school from Situate or Northern Rhode Island and came into the George West Junior High School. And the relationships that I had there continued for life. In fact, I still see and go to lunch with friends who graduated with me in 1954 from George West Junior High School, if you can believe it.
So this is book 3. Now we've asked, I mean, there's many more chapters to be had. Do you already have designs on what the next book is going to be?
Yes. Well, it would be a continuation. Now I would be moving on chronologically in my age, if you will, to high school. But the neighborhood is pervasive. It's always either you're in the neighborhood or coming out of the neighborhood and bringing out of that neighborhood those cultural experiences that you bring to bear as you move along in your journey. So now I'm moving to classical high school, and I have 50 stories to write about classical high school. It's a different experience. It's now you're growing up and coming of age and learning about playing sports in high school, et cetera, et cetera.
So you'll go to high school, and then, I mean, you've several books for college between undergrad and going to medical school and having a storied career in medicine, which led to being the chair of Rhode Island Hospital. So I wanted to talk, while I had you in here, about these books. But we are at a time when healthcare is in flux, not just here in the state, but across the country. We have healthcare professionals in here all the time, but as someone who has been in that seat, who has seen the perspective as that chair of the hospital, what do you envision as we see the tumult, as we look at Care New England, as we look at the closure of Memorial? How do we either sustain or make sure that we have a viable healthcare system here in the state?
Well, that's a
You're like, how much time do we
question.
have, Kate?
I didn't expect to hear that question after writing books about my childhood. Now I'm talking about healthcare.
I keep hearing your toes in
along
here.
the way, as I chaired the board of Rhode Island Hospital, before that I was the chair of a health insurance company, a local health insurance company, so I have a little perspective on what has to happen. First of all, I believe medical care is a right. We need to be giving everybody in this country quality medical care that is the equal for everyone. And that's the toughest part of the journey. That's why it's so expensive, because we have so many people participating in what they think should be delivered to this population. So many insurance companies, so many healthcare centers, and so many elected officials who have different opinions. But they can't neglect the fact that we could be better. We should be better at delivering health care. And we're not. We're not the best. We have a long way to go to get into the top third, I believe.
And so, Medicare for all?
I think there should be one insurer, yes indeed. I've thought about this a lot for a long time. I came from that health insurance
You've
company.
come from that world.
Where, we got to keep the health insurance company going. But no, I believe there should be a single insurer in this country. And I think that you would deliver more quality care to all the citizens by having a single insurer. That's a long road to get to that point. We do have a population that has a single insurer. That's the Medicare population. Not a bad delivery system. So many people take a deep breath when they reach that age and say, I'm on Medicare, I get my health care covered. Shouldn't everybody be taking that deep breath and saying the same thing? I think so.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that, and having first pitched the book to Bob Whitcomb, because he's certainly written about it for us here at GoLocal in his columns. I think you are very simpatico in your approach to healthcare here in the state. But let's tack back to the books before we let you go.
Okay.
Where can people find these books, Ed?
Well, they're at local bookstores. They're on my website, edwrights.com, and you can get them on Amazon also, of course. Amazon has them.
When did you get the Ed Wrights URL?
A long time ago, someone said, you should get that and make sure it stays. And so I have it, and it stayed for a long time.
Ed Wrights. And so you're going to focus on biographical. Any thoughts or plans to go outside of the autobiographical writing into fiction or other forays?
Well, it's a thought. If I can live long enough and do it, but people give me ideas that I should be writing either fiction or, on one case, I was I was approached by someone who has a true story that they want me to write up. So I'm not quite sure where I'm going to go. I have a lot of stories in the queue about my own growth and development, if you will. So hopefully someday I'll think of something, another genre, as they say.
So I got to ask you that last question. You know, you went to med school, you knew you had the interest in medicine.
Yeah.
Was there ever that part of you growing up that even thought before the post-career foray into writing that maybe you might want to be a writer?
No, absolutely never. I went to
It was the Sunday dinner question. It was the Sunday dinner question.
That was the question that triggered it. We had some very tough teachers, English teachers in high school, and I never forgot that experience. I wish I listened more carefully to some of the great ones. But no, once I went to medical school, it was about medicine. It was about reading medicine. It was about writing a medical article, scientific articles. So I never really thought that I was a writer, and then somehow it all developed, and I'm really lucky to be here.
And
Very
here you
so.
are today.
Uh-huh.
And as someone who'd gone into medicine back in the day, what do you tell young people who were interested in going into it? Is it just a very different field than when you had gone in?
Medicine is still the same. There's no different field. It is one of the finest things to be. I cannot encourage young people enough. Sometimes they get discouraged because where can you have someone come to see you because they need help? You can ask them any question. You can do any test that you want. You get paid for doing that, and at some point along the way, you have helped someone. Maybe even every day, by some decision that you made, you have changed a life or saved a life. There's nothing better than that. I know of no better profession, and I can't encourage people enough that it's just a great ride.
You've heard it from Ed, and you can read more from Ed about growing up Italian, and again, his latest book here today. Oh no, I've moved them around. His
That's
story continues from the neighborhood
so
to
much.
junior high. We're going to expect to see more books coming out
I
from
hope
you,
so.
Ed, and we'll have you back here in the studio.
I'd love to come.
I'll
It's
let you
great.
around the corner in the meantime.
Pleasure. Okay.
And
Thank
Iannuccilli, thank you so much for coming in. I'll walk around with you. We'll be right back here in the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center, so don't go anywhere.
Thank you.